What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha America, welcome to our show today. It's Thursday, January 10th, 2019. Sure happy it's Thursday, sure happy it's Thursday, sure happy it's Thursday. Little bit of a stumble there on our opening. We had a late start. The preceding show ran a little bit over, and so, but we're here, we're live, and we're going to be doing our program. We've got a lot to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, and observations. So getting right on into it here, pardon me, Donald Trump is down at the border right now, and as a matter of fact, he's making remarks about what's going on at the border, and basically saying that he understands that there are people who want to help the Dreamers and so forth, but that we need the barrier. And what's really interesting, the Border Patrol, thousands of Border Patrol agents are still on the job, even though they are not being paid. And even the acting Border Patrol chief is supposedly furloughed. He's down there. And of course, the Border Patrol agents are doing double duty along with the Secret Service to make sure that nothing happens to Donald Trump. So the stalemate is continuing. And a lot of people are basically saying, if Trump folds on this, if he gives up on the wall, the damage to our republic would be immense. Not only from the illegal immigrants pouring over the border, but we would lose our sovereign republic to the globalists. And that's really what's on the line. Now, what may be a good way for Donald Trump to go here? There's an article that came out of Natural News. Donald Trump lays groundwork for national emergency declaration, citing the humanitarian crisis of illegal migrants and human traffickers. And apparently the White House Office of the White House Counsel is already looking at it, and they're saying it's legal for Trump to do that. Any president can declare a state of emergency for any emergency just by saying this is an emergency. And of course, already you've got the Democrats and the open borders people saying, no, that would be illegal, that would be impeachable, we'll impeach him, for building a wall. And but I think that's a good way for Trump to go, because remember, there's that $27 billion in unspent money sitting over at the Pentagon. That's enough to fund the complete wall, not just the next installment, which is what we're talking about here. $25 billion, a wall all the way from the Pacific to the beginning of the Rio Grande in Texas. Let's just get it over and done with and get the border closed so that if anybody wants to come into this country, they come in through the proper ports of entry and they go through the legal immigration process. There's nothing unreasonable about that. So Trump declares the emergency. He grabs that Pentagon money, maybe has the Army Corps of Engineers do the construction on the wall. It's what they're good at. And then Trump goes ahead and signs the spending bill the Democrats have crafted, and he's the hero. He puts the government back to work, and he basically underscores the fact that it was the Democrats who basically shut down the government by being so unreasonable on this issue of the border wall. Okay. Now, Donald Trump in his speech, in fact, everybody who's an advocate of secure borders, have been citing all the statistics on the immigrant crime, the public health menace. Corporate media is still trying to hide them from you. And as I mentioned yesterday, there was that embarrassment during Trump's Oval Office speech when he came out and he said 1 out of every 3 of the migrant women are being raped on their way to the border. And CBS leapt to the fore saying, that's not true, that's not true. According to this source, it's between 60 and 80%. Then they realized that was only making Trump's whole point, and they yanked it down again. So they're out there with dueling hysteria. Each side is still trying to push their agenda. The Democrats want the open borders. They want to flood this country with illegal immigrants who can be counted on to vote Democratic. And frankly, looking at some of the Democrats who won in the midterm elections, I have to say that had to be a factor, because some of these Democrats are just not making a lot of sense. They're not very impressive people. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, Donald Trump has announced that he is canceling his trip to Davos, to the World Economic Forum, citing the Democrat intransigence on the shutdown. Now, we're still hearing about what happened when Donald Trump had his meeting with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, and Trump basically got up and walked out, which Schumer and Pelosi are saying, well, he threw a tantrum. He's just throwing a tantrum. We can't have a president who throws tantrum. Well, Trump didn't really throw a tantrum, but he did basically storm out, because Schumer and Pelosi's opening gambit was, you open the government first, then we'll talk about the border wall. And of course, Trump knows that's a non-starter, because in other meetings, Pelosi and Schumer have said not $1 for the wall. So there's no negotiating. And Schumer and Pelosi are playing the same game that we see Israel play all the time. Give us what we want first, and then maybe we'll do something nice for you. And it never works out. So Trump has to stand firm. If he drops this one, he's a one-term president. He's already got a lot of people who are very upset that he dropped the ball on vaccine safety, that he dropped the ball on cleaning up our election system, that we're still mired in all of these wars. They're very upset over the flip-flop, over bringing our kids home from Syria. If he drops this one, if he drops the wall, that third strike, and you are out. So, article over at the Daily Mail, Trump's blood-curdling anti-migrant rhetoric does him no favors, but the most offensive thing about his wall is the rank hypocrisy of all the Democrats who once voted for it. And of course, we have been underscoring this over the last few days, that all of these Democrats who are out there saying, oh, the wall is bad, the wall is bad, the wall is horrible, back in 2006, they were all in favor. They all spoke in favor of a secure border. They voted for the Secure Border Act, which was supposed to build 700 miles of wall, of which only 33 miles got built. And nobody ever asked, where did the rest of the money go? Why didn't the wall get built as the law required? And I will agree that Trump could be a little bit more dignified in his Twitter posts. He could have a little more gravitas. He is, after all, the president of the United States of America. But on the other hand, right now, social media is the only way we can get an unfiltered view of what the president is thinking. I mean, when you have CNN's Don Lemon coming on out and saying, well, we should pre-record the president's speeches and then edit them, to take out the propaganda that American people might believe. Well, then the corporate media, they're trying to wall him off. They want a media wall around the President of the United States of America. Meanwhile, we're continuing to see all kinds of memes mocking Pelosi and Schumer for their rebuttal to Trump's speech. And frankly, some of them are very funny. But looking at their faces and their wooden expression, to me, I think their facial expression and their body language tells me that they knew they were not getting through to the American people. Polls are showing the majority of the American people want that border control. They want this illegal immigration issue stopped. Remember, that was one of the big issues Trump campaigned on, closing the border and shipping all these illegal immigrants back home. And he's got to do it if he has any chance of a second term. And of course, the Democrats want all the illegals in here because once they get them registered to vote, most of them are going to vote Democratic here. And according to that Yale study, we have 25 million illegal immigrants in this country. And they have been strategically placed. They have been moved into congressional districts that were just slightly red, enough to change them just slightly blue, and that explains the Democratic victory in the House of Representatives. They didn't do very well in the Senate because that's the American people voting. But when you can game those districts with those illegal immigrants, that's why California got flipped. I mean, California's been traditionally a GOP stronghold for decades. And then all of a sudden for this midterm, it flips over Democrat? I don't think so. Not without something funny going on. Now, the media is still out there trying to make this illegal immigrant issue go away or pretend like it's no big deal. Over at CNN, Ana Navarro, basically in the middle of Steve Cortez talking about the crimes committed by illegal aliens, Ana Navarro pulled out her nail file on air and files her nails and then just has this "I am so bored" expression on her face. That is unprofessional. That is very unprofessional. But apparently that's what CNN wants. Now, Hillary Clinton went online and issued a call to counter Trump's lies on the border wall and promptly got roasted online. And she's announced she's putting together a fundraiser to gather $100,000 to support groups doing critical work to protect kids and families at the border. And a lot of the Twitter responses were, "Are you going to keep all this money too, like you did in Haiti?" So I'm glad that people are no longer willing to put up with this nonsense from the politicians. I'm glad they're willing to basically stand up and say, yeah, we know what's really going on. Story coming out of Breitbart. As you know, the Democrats, the open border people, are out there saying that, you got to fact check everything. Trump is lying and it's really not a problem. And the reality is that when you do an actual fact check, it turns out things are pretty bad down there by the border. Now, Nancy Pelosi accused the president of manufacturing the crisis at the United States-Mexico border, that there really isn't a problem. But Breitbart News went down and basically checked out for themselves. And they looked at the cartel warfare, the drug epidemic, deaths from an open border, asylum fraud, costs to the American taxpayers, revealed that there is a startling crisis at the border. Now, one of the other arguments the Democrats and the open borders people are pushing is that the wall is immoral. Oh, it's immoral to have a wall. Really, you should go to all these politicians and look at the walls around their homes. You've got a big wall around the Vatican. Are they immoral? Well, yeah, I guess if you look at the child molestation scandal, they are. Now, Tucker Carlson basically had Democratic commentator Jonathan Harris on his show and asked him, how do you describe, what is the difference between an immoral and a moral physical barrier on the border? And Jonathan Harris managed to just basically paint himself into a corner, trying to justify the Democratic leadership's refusal to pony up the money to fund the border barrier. And it's not a lot of money. $5.7 billion to the U.S. government is pocket change. And the U.S. government basically paid for a border wall for Jordan. They helped pay for the border wall for Israel. And so why all of a sudden this wall is immoral? This is all about power play. This is all about the Democrats absolutely determined to not allow Donald Trump to accomplish anything at all during his first term in office so they can campaign on that in 2020. They're already thinking 2020. They're already campaigning for the next presidential election. And it doesn't matter what harm it brings to this country or to you, the American people. They don't care. They just want to win. We have to win. We don't care how many people get hurt. We don't care how many incurable diseases come across that border. We don't care how many people are robbed or raped or burglarized by the illegal immigrants. We don't care if MS-13 gets a foothold in all of our schools. We just need to win. That's the only sin, is losing. Now, up in Seattle, there was a Fox affiliate who has now been fired, and apparently he intentionally manipulated the video of President Trump's speech for broadcast. And he basically doctored the tape where he took a clip of Trump licking his lips and he started looping it over and over to make the president seem bizarre and unbalanced. He distorted the president's face. He stretched it out a little bit in the aspect ratio to make the president look fat, and basically added a lot of orange tone to his skin. And the Fox affiliate placed the editor on leave pending an investigation. Now they have fired him and issued an apology. Now, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was on MSNBC with Rachel Maddow and just completely went off the rails to defend the open borders agenda. And some of her comments included, everyday immigrants commit crimes at a far lower rate than everyday Americans. That is totally unsupportable. And she's out there basically saying, we should let them into our country because they commit fewer crimes than regular America. How about let's not let them in to commit any number of crimes at all? Then she went on to say that the illegal immigrant caravan posted up at the southern border are acting more American than any person who seeks to keep them out ever will be. Yeah, if you look at the videos about what's going on down there at that border, yeah, the abuse, rape, violence, rioting, throwing rocks at the Border Patrol, that doesn't sound very American to me. And then Alexandria occasionally has a cortex double down on her previous claims that President Trump is racist. Hey, Alexandria, I have a news flash for you. Illegal isn't a race. And all of her remarks were made after she appeared on 60 Minutes, where she explained that truth is an acceptable casualty in the pursuit of moral superiority. Let me run that one by you again. According to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, truth is an acceptable casualty in the pursuit of moral superiority. In other words, in her view, it's okay to lie to get what we want because we know we're morally superior. So, we can lie to get what we want. And so Alexandria getting elected, I think, is one of the case studies of just how much impact on our elections the illegal immigrants are having. Because she's just nuts. Oh, and by the way, she's apparently off to the Sundance Film Festival to watch herself in a documentary. Well, I guess if she's out of the Congress, she can't cause a lot of harm. But, considering a while ago she was trying to run a GoFundMe for an apartment in Washington, D.C., I wonder how she got that money. Okay, we're going to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, back in 2016, France and Britain got together to build a wall in the French port city of Calais to prevent refugees and migrants from entering Britain. That wall is the reason that they're trying to get through by hopping on the backs of trucks heading for the Channel Tunnel. So France and Britain think walls can work. Berlin Wall worked pretty good. So did the Great Wall of China. Anyway, now, as you know, the shutdown is continuing, and it is causing a lot of hardship for the involved government departments, all of which are deemed as non-essential. That's what a partial shutdown is. We're shutting down the non-essential parts of government. Well, if they're not essential, why do we have them in the first place? something to think about. Story coming on out from the Daily Mail. Apparently, TSA agents are now quitting over the government shutdown. And the Airport Workers Union is warning of massive security risks for travelers as the staff walk out because they're missing paychecks and they won't work for free. Well, I got an idea. Have the passengers grope each other. That'll save a lot of money. Talk about flying the friendly skies. That'll work. I'm sure we've all stood in an airport, waiting line to board the plane, and we'll look up and down and we'll see somebody that, wouldn't mind getting my hands on them. There's a solution right there. Can save all that money. Let the passengers grope each other. On a more serious note, the employees of the U.S. Coast Guard have been informed by their command structure that they should consider holding garage sales to get over the shutdown hump. It's amazing here. All right, turning to our domestic politics here. The New York Times, once again, has egg all over their face. They were so eager to find proof that Paul Manafort was the go-between for the 2016 Donald Trump presidential campaign and Russia that it tweeted out a claim that a court filing unsealed on Tuesday proved the connection. The problem is the connections named were Ukrainian, not Russian. Oopsie, New York Times. Got another one. All right, let's start with a phone call. George in Texas. And George, I'm probably going to have to take you over the commercial break. What's on your mind?
Well, the thing is, I broke out my smallest violin for the TSA going without pay. And the thing is, and this is the perfect opportunity for the airlines to take over their own security. We don't need this federal bureaucracy.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And TSA has never once caught a real terrorist. Every time the Department of Homeland Security runs a security drill, half the fake bombs and guns get past these guys, who are too busy, looting the luggage of travelers. It's a national disgrace. TSA is the second most hated government agency in the nation.
Behind the IRS, or
yes,
with the IRS. But also, too, even like the National Park System, turn it back over to the states. Don't need a National Park Service. We don't need a BLM.
We definitely don't need a BLM because, again, all that land that the U.S. government has grabbed and is now starting to sell off, it was not theirs in the first place. There's a provision in the Constitution that says the federal government is only allowed to own the land under federal buildings and under military bases and federal infrastructure like airports and harbors. They're not allowed to just go on out and grab huge swaths of the public lands. That's our heritage. But of course, Nixon started the EPA to grab all that land in order to pledge as collateral for more government borrowing.
Also, too, it's with the thing is with the land grabbing, the federal government is supposed to get authorization from each state legislature. That's also in the Constitution.
Yeah, they're supposed to. They don't.
But anyway, as far as there's a national emergency to build the wall, one thing that concerns me, and this is, I know you spoke about it almost 10 years ago, or a little over 10 years ago, and that is PDD 51.
Okay, well, again, we need to get back and explain the difference between a national emergency and a state of emergency. And what Trump is talking about at the border is a state of emergency, which is what you would see if you were dealing with like a natural disaster, like Hurricane Katrina. That was a state of emergency. It was not a national emergency. And so all this talk about, they're going to shred the Constitution, Donald Trump is going to declare himself dictator, that's just more disinformation coming from the Democrats. George, stay on the line. We got to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking with George in Texas, and we're talking about TSA, and we're talking about all the abuses that we've had to deal with from them. And again, TSA is a useless government agency. They have never caught a terrorist. They continue to fail all of the security tests given them by the Department of Homeland Security. They're very costly. And yeah, I think this government shutdown, if they go on quitting their jobs, and I can imagine that, they're not too happy with the jobs anyway. Can you imagine trying to go out to a singles bar on Friday night and somebody says, "What do you do for a living?" So, well, I grab people's crotches at the airport. So, yeah, this might be a time for the airlines to go back to handling their own security. And hopefully it'll be done a lot better. Unfortunately, TSA, because like every other government agency, it's almost impossible to fire those people. They get into a very abusive mindset. It's almost like the Stanford prison experiment. And that's why we have all these issues of items being stolen from luggage. It's, even if they get caught, it's very hard to fire them. It's very rare that somebody gets fired.
Well, exactly. And the thing is like I would be scared to travel right now because if they ain't got a paycheck, how much will they try to steal my cash if I hand over my wallet?
Well, yeah, again, if you have too much cash with you, they can take it under the civil forfeiture laws. But again, the real issue is what are they going to take out of your carry-on luggage or even your checked bags and take on down to the local pawn shop? If they're not getting paid, that's a very real concern you just brought up.
Well, and the thing is, some of these TSA agents, I don't think they'd be hired for a security detail at a Trump Tower hotel, Trump Resort. Because I've been in a Trump casino, and I'll tell you one thing. Apart from the president, it's more like I got pickpocketed, and I had my wallet back before I even knew I was pickpocketed because he had a very good security detail.
Yeah, the security there in all those buildings is very good. They've got the eye in the sky cameras, and yeah, they want you to have a pleasant experience. But let's face it, these are people who couldn't get a job at the local burger joint. Because that's got to be the job of last resort. TSA crotch grabbing.
Well, and I think, and also that backscatter of radiation from the body scanners too.
Yes. And
so it's probably a blessing in disguise that they're quitting their jobs.
That's really an issue, and that's something, briefly they were admitting that cancer clusters were starting to show up around in the staff who were near these scanners. But of course, that has now been declared non-news, and corporate media won't touch it. But hey, it's good news for the cancer industrial complex. I'm sure they see a lot of airport workers these days.
Well, the thing is, the oncologists, I just found out they're car salesmen because I went to an independent doctor and had a CAT scan done.
Yeah.
And then compared it to last year, do you want to know what? By not taking chemo or taking radiation, my cancer has not spread to nowhere. It's actually slowly regressing.
Well, 25% of all cancers will spontaneously go into remission. That's a known fact. But the attitude of the oncologists are, we don't know which 25% it's going to be, so we're going to treat all the cancers and make lots and lots of money. And a lot of what they're using, like radiation, just leads to more cancer. Now they're discovering that chemotherapy may put your cancer into remission today, but bring it back 5 years from now in a more untreatable form. It really it's a racket. It's a racket like anything else in this country.
Well, I bet you they cleaned Ruth Bader Ginsburg out because I really think she ain't got many months left.
Yeah, apparently, this is her third go around with cancer, and she had to undergo surgery. Now, she was actually seen today being helped into a car, but she's missed 3 Supreme Court sessions in a row, which for Ruth Bader Ginsburg, that is significant. She has never missed a day of oral arguments in all of her years on the bench. So I'm sure her politics and her point of view aside, I'm sure we're all hoping that this is a temporary crisis, but we do know that the White House is very quietly getting ready to deal with either her retirement or her imminent passing.
My thing is, I think they should have a constitutional amendment, which more like says if a Supreme Court justice or federal judge is unable to discharge their duty, like the 25th Amendment, that the Senate should be able to take action to retire the judge if they're unable. Oh
boy, I don't know that I would like that. I mean, if you look at the current Congress and how unhappy they are with the fact that Trump has already appointed one Supreme Court justice and now looks set to appoint a second one. Congress, if there was such a provision in the Constitution, the Congress could use it to basically undo the president's choices. Now, the Constitution says an appointment to the Supreme Court is for life. Throughout history, the vast majority of Supreme Court justices have recognized when they are no longer able to discharge their duties and voluntarily step down. So they've been very responsible about that. And I suspect that we're about to see the same thing from Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And for those of you who haven't picked up on it yet, there is a movie out about her early life and her fight for legal equality between the sexes, which I'm definitely going to watch when that comes on cable. But we do wish her well, but it does look like Donald Trump is going to get a chance to pick another Supreme Court justice who's a conservative. And once again, we will get to see the three-ring circus put on by the Democrats during the confirmation hearings.
Well, thank you, Mike.
Well, thank you. We're going to let you go. And there we are. Okay. Story coming out of Raw Story. Democrats are launching an aggressive new focus investigating Steve Mnuchin's role in the Russia scandals. Of course, there isn't anything indicating he had a role in the Russia scandals. It's just another Democratic fishing expedition. And that's what they're going to be doing. They announced they were going to do it. They were confident they were going to win the House of Representatives in the midterms. And they were announcing going on in, we're going to put all of our attention and our focus on investigating Trump and everybody connected with him. And who cares if the country is falling apart behind us? That's not important. Getting Trump is what's important. Winning in 2020 is what it's important. They're fiddling while the nation burns. Now, the Washington Post, to their credit, has come on out and forthrightly admitted that the so-called sophisticated Russian 2016 voter targeting effort on social media doesn't seem to exist. And basically yesterday, the Washington Post came on out and reported on it. A study of the Facebook data showed it never happened. It was just another part of the Russia bashing, Russia collusion. And all of this stuff goes back to 2016, where apparently Hillary Clinton actually seriously considered challenging the results of the 2016 presidential election on the claim of Russian collusion. And I think, thankfully, somebody talked her out of it, and they may have talked her out of it both because it would have presented a constitutional crisis. It could have led to rioting in the streets. But most importantly, it's one thing to say Russian collusion in the media. It's quite another to go into a court of law and say Russian collusion, because then you would be required to provide some kind of proof. And as we know from all of these months of Robert Mueller's investigation, there isn't any. Now, there's an old politician's axiom that if you can't win an argument, first of all, you start by arguing the law. And if you can't win by arguing the law, you cite the logic. And if both the facts and the logic and the law are against you, you call the other side names. And I guess that's where Representative Stephen Cohen is going, because he basically is implying that everybody who watched Donald Trump's Tuesday night Oval Office are similar to the Ku Klux Klan membership. Now, I don't know what he thinks he's going to accomplish with this. Insulting Trump's supporters are not going to turn them into Democrats. If anything, it is going to harden their hearts into supporting Trump that much more, as it should, because this is definitely dirty pool. But it basically, when the Democrats are down to this, insulting the president, making it personal, trying to insult the president's supporters, thinking it's going to drive them away, it basically tells you they don't have anything. They don't have anything to go with. If they had anything on the president, they would have done something in the last 2 years. And as I said, everybody's already thinking 2020, and out in California, their Senator Kamala Harris is throwing her hat into the ring for the 2020 Democratic field here. It basically, the Democratic primaries are turning into a clown car. Little tiny door is going to open and 40 or 50 clowns are going to fall on out and start debating each other. Now, let's talk about this tech billionaire, Reid Hoffman. This is the guy who was bankrolling this midterm meddling. And it's now turned out that there were 4 different false flag disinformation campaigns targeting Roy Moore, as well. That was in 2017, and a lot more of the same in 2018. This guy was he was meddling. He was clearly meddling. And apparently he also bankrolled this story about he bankrolled the Russian bot false flag. And he just kept on going through 2018. So this guy, American Engagement Technologies and its founder, Mickey Dickerson, were the ones who got the money from Reid Hoffman to meddle in the 2018 midterm elections. So where are the sanctions on them? Because remember, all these sanctions that have been thrown at Russia were supposedly because Russia was meddling in our 2016 election, which has never been proven. Here we have a documented case of an American citizen and an American company meddling in the midterms. Shouldn't they be sanctioned? Anyway, as I mentioned before, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is traveling to Sundance to see herself in a documentary. And apparently the documentary is called Knock Down the House, and it focused on the 4 female working class candidates for Congress challenging the Democratic establishment. And of course, Alexandria is the only one who won. So she's going to go out there to Sundance and hobnob with the Hollywood elite and just admire herself on screen. Talk about vanity run amok. We have been talking about this movie that's out called The Post, and how it talks about the story of the Pentagon Papers. And the timing is rather appropriate. Daniel Ellsberg, who basically blew the whistle about how the U.S. government was lying to everybody about the war in Vietnam, is now 87 years old. He is he's been awarded the 2018 Olof Palme Human Rights Prize. It's 48 years late, but he's getting it. And basically he's being given the honor for his profound humanism and exceptional moral courage in revealing successive U.S. administrations that lied to the public about the Vietnam War. So good for Daniel Ellsberg. And I mean, they put him through heck. I mean, if you've seen the movie The Post, they don't cover it all. In addition to Nixon trying to use the courts to shut down the Washington Post and the New York Times, they were following Daniel Ellsberg around. They burglarized the office of his psychiatrist. Ellsberg was seeing psychiatrists or psychologists. They were looking for any information they could leak to the media to damage his reputation. That's how dirty these people play. In the movie The Post, the character of Robert McNamara is talking to Catherine Graham, while Catherine was struggling with the decision whether or not to publish the papers. And McNamara says, you know, I've seen administrations come and administrations go, and, you know, they can all play pretty rough, but Nixon is a totally different animal. And if there's a way to shut you down, they will find it. And McNamara was right about that. Nixon had surrounded himself with some really unscrupulous people, which is, of course, what ultimately led to the Watergate break-in and Nixon's forced resignation. All right, so let's talk about the war zones around the world, because there are so many of them. Apparently, back on the 9th, which was yesterday, Ahrar al-Sham groups in northwestern Hama surrendered and dissolved themselves under pressure from the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, formerly Jabhat al-Nusra, the Syrian branch of al-Qaeda. In other words, al-Qaeda just defeated one of the Turkish-backed opposition groups. Now, according to pro-opposition media, the defeated members will get an opportunity to withdraw to the region of Afrin after they hand over their heavy weapons to al-Qaeda. So it's still a mess over there. Too many players. Remember, too many cooks spoil the broth. Too many groups are spoiling the war here. Now, as you know, back on the 19th of December, Trump announced victory over ISIS in Syria, and saying that was the only reason the United States was in Syria, therefore he was going to bring the troops home. Well, apparently Mike Pompeo had a recent press conference in Cairo where he came on out and said, well, we got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. So we're talking about this joint press conference in Cairo, where U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo basically said that U.S. troops will withdraw from Syria eventually, but they're there to continue the fight against ISIS. Then he went on to really basically jump the shark, in my opinion. America is a force of good in the Middle East. He also claimed that when America retreats, chaos follows. For those who fret about the use of American power, remember, America has always been a liberating force, not an occupying power in the Middle East. We've never dreamed of domination. Can you say that of the Iranian regime? And frankly, I'm amazed that Mike Pompeo didn't spontaneously combust on that last one. Here's an article that came on out from The Week, and it's talking about the insubordination of John Bolton, which is exactly what appears to have happened. Now, normally in any hierarchical organization, and especially in government, and especially in Washington, D.C., there's always the unwritten rule: don't upstage the boss. So Trump comes on out and says, we're going to withdraw the troops. And then Bolton comes on in and says, no, we're putting conditions. You know, ISIS has to be gone, and Turkey has to guarantee they won't go after the Kurds. And they're absolutely right. It is insubordination. And as I recall, insubordination is a legitimate grounds for Trump to fire Bolton. And I think Trump ought to fire Bolton, because Bolton is leading this nation into more war. Bolton loves wars. He doesn't have to pay for them. He's too old to fight in them. He just wants to sit back and watch them on TV. Oh, look what I've done. Ooh. Over in France, as you know, we're coming up on the weekend here, and the Yellow Vest protesters are hoping to trigger a bank run with a coordinated nationwide cash withdrawal. No indication yet on how many people are going to go along with it. I guess we won't really know until the time for the withdrawal happens. But by threatening the French financial system, the Yellow Vests want to peacefully force the government to pass their reforms. And by golly, if it works, we should be paying very, close attention. So apparently, Yellow Vest sympathizer Taz San on Facebook said, if the banks weaken, the state weakens immediately. It's the elected officials' worst nightmare. Yeah, it's a good idea if they can get it to work here. Meanwhile, the French government is moving to impose a police state in response to the Yellow Vests. All right, we're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're going to go to the phones to Joe in Tennessee. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. This whole Ruth Bader Ginsburg thing is really going to be a lot of fun. Part of politics is demoralizing your enemy. As a conservative, somewhat right-winger, white person who the other side is trying to, repopulate against me, I like to see the other side demoralized. I'm not friendly to them anymore. They're not friendly to me. They want to destroy me. They want to replace me. So I'm glad that this Ruth Bader Ginsburg thing is going to basically make them all go to see their psychiatrist. But the thing about Ginsburg, to me, with Trump and the Supreme Court, it's all karma for them killing Scalia. I really think they killed Scalia.
Yes, I
agree. And they thought they got away with it. And, there's a weird, balance in the universe. And I think sometimes when you overstep it or you overreach it, it comes back hard on you. And I think Ginsburg will be gone. And you never know, maybe even another one. Who's that one? Stevens or something? Or Breyer, is it? There's another real old lefty on there that's about ready to go. But one other thing I wanted to say is you were bringing up Roy Moore. And, I don't understand why Roy Moore doesn't sue that billionaire. I mean, the guy's a billionaire. And he's in the wrong. And I don't know why Roy Moore can't haul his butt into court and start digging into that.
Here's my question. Okay, here's my question. What law has actually been broken? See, that's where it gets sticky. Yes, what this billionaire did and this company did are unethical and immoral and was election meddling, but they can basically say this was political speech protected by the First Amendment.
That might be true, but, I mean, there's a bit of a fraud here. It's like, did you see that guy in Seattle? They took the president's broadcast and they changed his face and made him real orange and had his tongue sticking out.
Yep.
And all the guy got was, sent on vacation.
No, he's been
can
fired.
Can you imagine that man?
He's been fired.
He has been fired.
He has been fired, yes.
All right, well, because at first I guess they were just going to send him on vacation and then the outrage, because I was very outraged by that. I'm glad they did fire him.
Yep.
One other quick thing to end on is I live here in eastern Tennessee, but you can tell by my accent I'm from New York, and I've been to Virginia and Florida. But I've got a couple of people, I've been running into New Yorkers all the time here. My new neighbor just bought a house for his daughter. He's from Long Island. There's a guy at the dump the other day I talked to from Buffalo. So, Cuomo and the lefties and their anti-gun, anti-life, their hatred for conservatives, well, we'll take them here in Tennessee, because everyone that I met was a hard-working guy, a pipe fitter, all people that are salt of the earth, and we want them in Tennessee. And Cuomo and all you lefties in New York, screw you. You'll watch your taxes go up. You're going to have people there that are just a burden on your society, and all the hard-working, good people are going to come to the heartland in the red state. So screw all of you up there in New York. Excuse my French, and I that's just the way I feel about it. You elect a monster like Cuomo, and this is what you get. You get an exodus. Vote with your feet, as Reagan used to say.
Well, that is starting to happen. We're seeing a lot of people who have the means to move are leaving the overpriced cities, and they're starting to basically go back out to the rural areas, and I think that's a very healthy thing. The push to get people crammed into the cities is to make it easier to basically corral them, tax them, regulate them, spy on them. And I think more and more people moving to the rural areas is actually kind of a healthy thing. I think it's a good step toward freedom. For one thing, you're going to have a lot of room around you. You're going to have, I mean, to judge by the places we lived in Washington State, you're going to have enough ground around you to put in a vegetable garden if that's what you want to do. We certainly don't have that here in Hawaii. But getting on back, blaming the New Yorkers for Cuomo, you need to remember we live in an era in which there is massive election fraud. And so we really can't say that the people of this district, this state, or even the entire nation voted for somebody who turns out to not be very good. They may have simply had better vote riggers than the opposition. Go back and look at 2016. I mean, they didn't even try and hide the fact that they were rigging the primaries to get Bernie Sanders out and Hillary Clinton in. And now we're finding out.
Yeah, but Mike.
Yeah.
I've never heard of a governor of a state telling people that he politically doesn't agree with to leave his state. He said that about people that liked and wanted guns. He said that about people that were. He said, "Get out." He said, "Get out of my state. I don't want you here." And there comes a point where the people of New York, of goodwill, even the lefty, should just run him out of town on a rail right then and there. Now people are taking him up on his word. And this one guy.
Well, they really ought to. They really ought to. Now maybe Cuomo's goal is to turn New York into a liberal stronghold, the way Baltimore is. And will probably result in New York eventually looking just like Baltimore.
Well, that's true, but the people that just sit for it, they deserve what they're going to get. Now, this guy was saying he was paying $14,000 a year for a regular-sized house in property tax, and the place he bought here in Tennessee is like $600 a year in property tax. Now, they have all those big pension funds up there for all their school teachers and their policemen and all their workers, and they're bankrupt, and the cost, that's why you're paying these huge, incredibly crazy amount of property tax. And that's a big part of why the people are leaving too. The gun rights, the property tax, the abortion, just the general state of New York, where it's become the people that don't produce anything are the ones that the government cares about. That's basically what we're at. We're at an Ayn Randian state there in New York, and
yes.
The left is one. It's very sad because it's a beautiful place. It's great living up there, taking the subways, and Manhattan's got a lot going for it. But I mean, when you have leadership like that, they're totalitarians. I mean, if you want to get creeped out, watch his inauguration speech, Cuomo. Just the way he enunciates words, it's weird. It was almost scary to watch. The guy it gives you the creeps listening to that guy. Trust me. He can't even give a speech without weirding out on words. It's just, honest to God, if you can't sense the malice in that man, it's just, you don't have any sense.
Well,
anyway,
again,
that's all I
as
got.
I keep saying, the curse of political power is that it attracts the very people who should not be allowed to have it. Anyway, Joe, thank you for the call. We're going to let you go. We need to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network, and we need to get back to the news. We're talking about the Yellow Vest protest, and the French government's response is basically to impose a police state. And apparently, the French government is very concerned over this call for people to do a run on the banks. And right now, the French government has come on down and said that any protest that is not given a permission to take place by the French government will be treated as a criminal gathering. So free speech is now basically outlawed in France here. Right now, polls are showing 80% support for the movement. And I think the fact that the government has now criminalized organized protests may, in fact, motivate more of those people to participate in this mass withdrawal of money. Meanwhile, apparently almost 60% of France's entire speed camera network have now been disabled by the Yellow Vests, who do not see these speed cameras as being about public safety, but just another way to loot the French people. Over in Great Britain, James Goddard, he's the leader of the British Yellow Vests, he challenged European Union loyalist Anna Soubry on the street. He has now been purged from Facebook and PayPal, who are very much on the side of the globalists. Now, Ms. Soubry complained that she felt she was in physical danger from all these yellow vests standing around here. Nobody made a threatening gesture toward her. But that's the new thing. I'm physically threatened. Now, a little bit of good news. We were talking about how the United States Senate, their very first action with the new Congress was to look at a bill to outlaw the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement in this country. And the optics on it were very bad because you have a government and partial shutdown. You have all these other problems going on with the country. What's the first thing the senators do? Oh, Israel, oh, Israel, oh, Israel. So then they announced that they were going to basically put it on hold until after the government shutdown ended. Then they changed their mind again. And on Tuesday, when they thought nobody was looking, they rushed it to the floor for a vote, and it failed. It lost by 4 votes. And that may indicate 2 things. One, erosion of Israel's influence over our Senate, which would be a good thing. Or maybe the senators just didn't want to vote for a law that would be sent to the Supreme Court and declared as unconstitutional, because that looks really bad on a resume coming into the next elections. Over in Palestine, their Ministry of Endowment has documented 101 cases of Israeli vandalism against Palestinian holy sites in the occupied territories just during December of last year. And the ministry said that the Israeli occupation carried out more than 30 incursions at Al-Aqsa Mosque and prevented the call to prayer 51 times at the Ibrahimi Mosque in Hebron. Other violations were committed, including digging under holy sites in Silwan, in the Old City, incursions, provocative marches, arrest and deportation orders against Al-Aqsa's guards, and the emergence of racist graffiti. 101 separate cases just in December. That works out to roughly 3 per day. Now, as you know, Netanyahu's closest challenger in the upcoming elections is gaining in the polls. The gap between them is narrowing. So Shin Bet came on out with this claim that they were aware a foreign government was going to interfere in Israel's elections, at which point my comment was Netanyahu's going to pull a Hillary. If he loses that election, he's going to claim, oh, outside interference, the election is null and void, I get to go on being king of Israel. Russia, of course, is already denying reports that they have any intentions to interfere in Israel's elections. Apparently, Shin Bet has laid the blame on them. Convenient scapegoat. Who are we going to blame? Blame the Russians. Everybody blames the Russians. And given that Robert Mueller has found no indication of Russian interference in our elections in 2016, given that the New York Times is now admitting that this much ballyhooed Russian social media campaign to swing the election appears not to have existed, I'm willing to take Russia's word on this over that of Shin Bet. Meanwhile, human rights groups Al-Mazan Center for Human Rights in Gaza, Gisha, the Legal Center for Freedom of Movement, and Adala are basically voicing a complaint with Israeli officials to refrain from spraying of very potent herbicides near the Gaza Strip. See, Israel maintains what they call the security buffer zone, and they will spray this buffer zone with these powerful herbicides to just kill all the plant life in it so that they've got a clear field of fire. The problem is, depending upon which way the wind is blowing, these herbicides blow onto the adjacent Palestinian farmlands and kill all the food crops as well. And apparently they've been doing this since 2014. Over in Lebanon, President Michael Aoun is warning that the Israeli threats, Israel's been threatening Lebanon again, could lead to new wars, displacement, and ethnic cleansing. And speaking before members of the diplomatic corps accredited to Lebanon in Beirut, Aoun said the peace does not take place when deals are made at the expense of the refugee who was expelled from his land and his identity was stolen. Gee, I wonder who he's talking about there. The other day we were talking about how the United States is back in Somalia, in Africa. And according to this article in Reason, the United States has maintained some degree of military presence inside Somalia for pretty much the last 3 decades. But a pattern of escalation that began late in President Barack Obama's second term has accelerated in the 2 years since President Donald Trump took office. Airstrikes are on the rise, hundreds of U.S. boots are on the ground, and Trump's March 2017 decision to designate portions of Somalia as areas of active hostility means military operations can proceed with less oversight and greater tolerance for civilian casualties. So, Somalia is another addition to Washington's roster of undeclared, undebated, and unnecessary wars of uncertain connection to U.S. security. And a Friday report from NBC News suggested Trump had finally come to see it that way. NBC is now saying that the Trump administration plans to scale down the American military intervention in Somalia, narrowing the mission and shifting responsibility to local actors like the African Union and the Somali government. Well, there's a little bit of good news there as well. So it looks like Trump intends to pull back on all of these wars. The problem is he gets overridden, apparently, by John Bolton and Mike Pompeo. Over in China, they have now activated their ship killer Dongfeng ballistic missiles. Apparently, a U.S. Navy ship traveled within 12 nautical miles of the Parcel Islands, according to the U.S. Pacific Fleet, to challenge excessive maritime claims and preserve access to the waterways as governed by international law. Now, the article goes on to say, in the 1990s, China laid claim to all the Parcel Islands using a straight baseline around the entire archipelago, which it has labeled the Xisha Islands. The boundary is not recognized by international maritime law, while Vietnam and Taiwan have also laid claim to the islands. Okay, let's back up. First of all, if you look at a map of the islands in question, there's a lot of water around them. This idea that the United States is obligated to preserve maritime passages through these islands is nonsense. You can sail around. You don't have to go through those islands. And by the way, what this article failed to mention is that all the way back at the end of World War II, all of the victorious nations got together in Cairo and they basically divvied up what was left of the Japanese Empire. And Japan during World War II had basically taken those islands from China, and according to the Cairo Convention, they were given back to China. So according to the Cairo Convention, they are China's. Now, these other countries may say, we covet those islands, but they don't really have a legitimate claim. The problem is, of course, that oil and gas have been discovered underneath them. So one more place for us to go to war over in the name of petroleum, the oil wars. That's what these are all about. South Korea's leader, Moon Jae-in, is saying that a new U.S.-North Korea summit looks imminent. As I mentioned yesterday, there is talk of it taking place right here in Hawaii, which will mess up the traffic. Okay, we got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about Korea. We're talking about an imminent second summit between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un. And Kim Jong-un is out there saying that he's going to try and make this next summit achieve a result that will be welcomed by other countries. Now, that's kind of an interesting statement. And I'm not sure what he's signaling there. Is it going to be that North Korea is going to go along with the international feeling about nuclear weapons? Or is it going to be that Kim Jong-un is going to try and make Donald Trump look weak, which I'm sure many other countries would welcome that as well. But it's kind of a very, very bizarre comment to be making here. Okay, down in Brazil, the huge rash of violence. Apparently, President Jair Bolsonaro's crackdown on crime, which is including military takeovers of Brazilian cities and shoot-to-kill orders carried out by teams of sharp shooters. And apparently, 500 National Guard troops have been deployed to the northeastern town of Fortaleza in the state of Ceará, after authorities have been overwhelmed by more than a week of violence, which saw 160 attacks. Now, it doesn't say it in this article, but I'm going to speculate that what they're dealing with there is basically a hotbed of the illegal drug trade. And that has become a serious problem. In South America, in Mexico, certainly here in the United States, it's less visible. But in Mexico, the drug cartels down there, they have their own armies. And they've got all the latest weapons, some of them courtesy of Fast and Furious. The United States is trying to basically close off Venezuela diplomatically. Apparently, Venezuela is now in the U.S. government's crosshairs. And Paraguay has just announced they're cutting off diplomatic ties with Venezuela. They're closing their embassy, calling their diplomatic population, their staff back home, apparently under U.S. pressure against the Venezuelan government. So, not doing very well in the Middle East. Let's go muck about South America and see if we do any better. Now, here's an interesting little story, and it's coming out of Zero Hedge. Pardon me. As you know, the race is on for hypervelocity projectiles, and other countries like China have developed what are called rail guns. And these are magnetic guns, and because they're magnetic, the propulsive force can be applied to the projectile throughout the entire length of the barrel, whereas with a conventional chemical propellant gun, the majority of the impulse is basically at the breech, and you have to limit it lest you rupture the breech. And then as the projectile flies up the barrel, the pressure behind it gets less and less and less and less. So the U.S. Navy, to try and sort of catch up with the idea of a hypervelocity projectile, has been running tests with these new munitions out of the existing guns on the USS Dewey, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer. And they're using the deck gun, which is 40 years old, to fire these new high-tech ammunition. Basically what it is, it's a discarding sabot round. It's the U.S. Navy's version of a munition that tanks have been using for a very long time. It's much lighter than a conventional shell, and it's much smaller than a conventional shell. And around it, it has this sabot, or shoe, which basically captures the propellant pressure and thrusts this lighter, slimmer projectile out the front of the gun, at which point the shoe peels away, and that missile, if you will, is going to travel much faster and much further. So this is their effort to play catch up. And again, this is something tanks have been using for a very, very long time. Okay, let's talk about the economy here. Article out of Investment Watch blog saying that China and the U.S. trade talks are really doing nothing. It is the computer algorithms in the high-frequency trading systems that are pushing the market higher. Is a higher market a good thing? Well, it's certainly good for the politicians and the corporate media to say, see, the economy's doing very well. But simply driving the price of the stocks higher without bringing up the underlying value is not a good thing. If the stocks aren't actually worth what their prices are, that's a bad thing. And right now, the U.S. stock market is more heavily overvalued than it was leading into the crash of 1929. And that means when the correction comes, and even the computers won't be able to hold it off, the first ones out will get their money, and all everybody else will have left is their last brokerage report with an impressive looking number at the bottom. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And we have a caller on the line, Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I wanted to talk just about Trump real quick with, Ruth Gator Ginsburg. I hope she gets better. But remember when she came out when Trump was running and she said something against Trump? Remember that?
I remember
and she
that.
got political. And she, and it's a shame because none of the Supreme Court people should be political.
They're not
even
supposed
though the
to be.
politicians.
I mean, that broke a long-standing tradition, and Ginsburg drew a lot of criticism for that. And it wasn't even the fact of what she said; it was that she said it at all. That basically people felt that she had damaged the image of the United States Supreme Court
And of herself.
Yes.
But Mike, this is who she is, though. Like, she's a neoliberal, right? I mean, she's got that cult belief, right? I mean,
oh yeah, no question about it. No question about it. And I'm sure right now the Democrats are just in a total blind panic, over the fact that Trump may be able to replace her with another conservative. And the rumors are flying that she's going to retire. Apparently Trump still has his short list left over from the Kavanaugh nomination. And there's this one Judge Amy something. She's a ultra conservative. He may give the nod to her. So I'm sure the Democrats are saying, put Ginsburg back on a dolly, take her into the court, prop her up, have her stuffed, take her to the taxidermist and have her stuffed, and just put her in her chair. I mean,
yeah, you know what's crazy, Mike? Of all times this happens, it's going on now when all these other things are going on. It's just, it's a bad situation and it's just going to get worse, it's crazy. You ain't seen nothing yet. Kavanaugh was nothing compared to this. This is going to be all-out war. You know that, right?
Again, if Trump nominates this female conservative judge who was on the short list, it's going to leave the Democrats with far less ammunition. What are they going to do? Claim that this female judge was molesting altar boys or something?
And Mike, I wanted to talk about America, what's going on in France. Patriotic, being French, and I think the people had enough with that crap. The same here, American exceptionalism, right? And they use that as a tool to for you to get behind what they do.
Yes.
As evil as it is, And I just see the stuff going on in France and Britain, and nothing's working out now anymore, right? It's just a mess around the world, and in the Middle East especially, and now they're going to mess around with South America? Come on now. How much more can people in the U.S. believe or not believe? You know what I mean? How much more can people take? The French people had enough, but I wonder, you think the Americans will ever have enough?
At some point, yes. At some point, yes. Right now, we're in a situation where the American people on an intellectual level understand a good deal of what's going on. I talk to a lot of people around here, and when you talk about, I mean, the majority of the American people know that the official story of 9/11 is a hoax. The majority of the people know that these wars are all wrong. But it's all on a very abstract, intellectual level. When there is an event that drives it down to the emotional level, that's going to be when we see the American people stand up and put on the yellow vests.
Because, Mike, it is unraveling.
Oh, yeah.
Their whole plan, or whatever their plan is unraveling. And, and Syria still, is an open warfare place, right?
Yes.
Partially. And did you see Erdogan? He says, like, he's not going to buy the Patriot missile system if he can't buy the S-400. So basically he's saying the S-400 he's buying from Russia.
Yes.
So if he gets the Patriot system or not, he don't care. But I wonder if you still get the F-35, as broken as it is,
Again, I think, one of the best things that could happen right now is for Israel to fly an F-35 into Syria and it gets shot down. And that would just end that whole nonsense trillion-dollar boondoggle. I mean, it's huge amounts of money. All these countries around the world that have been arm-twisted into buying the F-35, they're going to get very unhappy. They're going to say, we're canceling the contract. This aircraft does not do what you told us it was going to do.
Mike, on a hypothetical thing, do you think the future is like drone, not manned aircraft per se? Even for like flying in outer space eventually, right? Can you have a drone controlled through satellites to travel further out? You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're called spacecraft.
Well, you know what I mean, though. Like when we become so more advanced than we were with drone technology. But I mean, with the AI and stuff like that, it's still in its infancy. I mean, I see a lot of greatness for being in outer space with this technology if we're still around to use it,
Well, I'm opposed to war in Earth orbit because it will basically create a barrier to future space travel, whether it's commercial or scientific exploration. There is a treaty against the weaponization of space, but it looks like the United States is seriously looking at violating that one as well. The problem with the high tech is that eventually you run out of it. We saw that in World War II, where Germany started out with all of the amazing machinery that they had built, and then as it began to break down and wear out and Germany's economy couldn't replace it, war went back to being what it had been before, hand-to-hand combat, bayonets against each other. The same thing would be here right now. We may start out with all of these drones and all of this, automated weapon systems and missiles flying overhead, and assuming we don't get into mushroom clouds, when all of that stuff wears on out, it'll be back down to boots on the ground and slugging it out, hand-to-hand combat. Because the government isn't going to surrender when they run out of the whiz-bang toys. I mean, toward the end of World War II, Nazi Germany was mobilizing the kids. They were putting 12-year-old kids to drive the tanks.
Mike, in the long run, I like the exploration of space for us to learn new things, but it's just unfortunate human beings have a tendency to be violent, right? Like, not all of them, but, we have that tendency, and I just hate to enslave, some people on Mars with, a private central bank, you know what I mean? Because it just seems like that's, you know what I mean? Like, it seems like it's just everything's about, controlling people. I mean, you look at the West, it's just, that's why I hope we never meet aliens because, unless maybe they want to control us, You know what I mean?
Well, let me back up here a little bit. Most people left to themselves and with a comfortable life around them, they're not violent. We unfortunately have a capacity of being induced to violence by our political and religious leaders. And maybe that served some kind of a survival purpose in prehistoric times, but it's definitely past its sell-by date. As far as space aliens are concerned, I can't imagine anything we have they would be interested in. I can't imagine anything we have that's worth the cost of slowing down to get into Earth orbit, coming on down here, looking around, taking off, and then whipping back up to super light speed. It's like I say, when you drive down the highway, do you stop and look at every anthill you pass? I really do think, and with apologies, to Professor Hawken, who was concerned that aliens represented a real threat to the Earth, I'm pretty sure they're out there. I'm convinced the universe is just filled with intelligent civilizations. I just don't think they're going to be interested in us.
And he must have not been looking in the Middle East for the last, 30 years.
Thanks an awful lot. There is that other thing that any space aliens who want to come on down here may be saying, we could get shot at. Why bother? And, you look at movies like Cowboys and Aliens, where the aliens have come to Earth to get our gold. I mean, gold is plentiful out there in the cosmos. The reason it's rare on the surface of the Earth is it's very heavy. There's a lot of gold deep underground, and there's a lot of gold out there in the asteroid belt. And apparently there are already commercial ventures that are starting to say, we need to go back to the moon and see if there's something there worth mining. Which reminds me of that Robert Heinlein story, The Man Who Sold the Moon. And there may well be resources out there. If we could get these giant tankers in this endless circulating orbit out to Jupiter and back, we would have all the hydrocarbons we would ever need. Just think about that one for a while. Okay, getting on back to planet Earth and the economy. The U.S. is considering putting penalties on 2 of the European contractors who were working on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Because after all, it's Russian, and Russia will control it, and we can't have that. I keep telling you, those pipelines are not just about oil and gas. They are considered of strategic geopolitical import. And the U.S. does not want Russia to have the Nord Stream 2. So they're throwing more sanctions over there. Over in Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei is out there basically saying that the U.S. sanctions against Iran are proving to be far less effective than the U.S. hoped for, and that ultimately the U.S. faces an unprecedented defeat in trying to get Iran to capitulate using those sanctions. Now, I wish he'd tone down his rhetoric. I don't think it's helping things. But we're finding out that, the more the U.S. throws sanctions around the world, the more the rest of the world moves to evade the U.S. sanctions by dumping the U.S. dollar. And Russia just dumped another $101 billion from their dollar reserves. It's pivoting to China. It's moving into the Chinese currencies. It's a dramatic acceleration in their policy to de-dollarize. And over at the Bank of England, their boss is saying that China's renminbi will rival the dollar as the global reserve currency, and soon. Because more and more countries are turning their back on the greenback. Over in Great Britain, apparently Parliament decided they were going to have a debate on extreme poverty and human rights on Northern Ireland. This was a United Nations report, and the members of Parliament were supposed to debate the findings of this UN report, but only 14 members of Parliament showed up in the House of Commons. And it may very well be because they all know there's extreme poverty. They know there isn't a thing they can do about it. So why bother showing up? Here in the United States of America, the middle class is rapidly vanishing. Most people who think they're middle class no longer are. Almost half of all U.S. workers are making less than $30,000 a year. But boy, are the rich getting richer. Ooh, boy. Everybody's, the gossip rags are already going ballistic over Jeff Bezos' coming divorce, and how much of his empire, his his wife is going to wind up with. I would imagine there probably was a pretty much ironclad prenup going into that, but I digress. There are new policies from the Trump administration that are aimed at cracking down on China's access to strategic U.S. technologies. I think this is a good thing. But because of this, China has all but halted investments in U.S.-based tech startups. Now, venture funding out of China peaked last year at a record $3 billion. And apparently China was investing in these high-tech companies not to make money off the companies, but to gain access to their technology. And Trump is saying, no, that's not going to happen. And I agree with that one wholeheartedly. If we're inventing these new technologies, we have to keep them inside our country in order to commercialize them. One of the biggest mistakes made by corporate America in the 1980s, 1990s, was this offshoring of our technology to other countries, such as China, Taiwan, South Korea, which included instructions on how to make these products, which basically gave these countries all of this technology, basically for free. And now they're making their own products using that technology they acquired from the U.S. with which to compete with us. Now, we're looking back at the numbers for the holiday shopping season, and over in Great Britain, they're saying it was their worst Christmas shopping season in a decade. This according to the British Retail Consortium. So they had a really, really bad time, and I imagine it was just as bad here. There was all that hype about Christmas sales, and they do it every year. As soon as Black Friday launches, oh my goodness, the malls are full. People are rushing and they're getting the bargains. Get on down there before the stores run out of whatever it is that you want to have. But apparently Macy's, Kohl's, L Brands, Target, Nordstrom all showed major declines. And as you know, Sears is still struggling to avoid liquidation. Apparently, M&S and Debenhams report falling Christmas sales, and its sales fell 5.7% in the 18 weeks prior to the 5th of January. And apparently, Debenhams is now closing 50 stores. Ordinary people don't have money anymore. We don't. We cannot go into those shopping malls and buy things because we are unable to trade our labor for decent wages and salaries. And it's amazing that all these so-called economic experts either don't get it or really don't care. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking about the economic news here. We're talking about the disappointing holiday shopping season, which we all knew that was going to be what happened. There hasn't been a decent Christmas shopping season in years as the economy has continued to deteriorate, and the stores loaded up on a bunch of inventory, which now they're having to liquidate ahead of the inventory tax. Speaking of other disappointment, out in California, apparently the sales of recreational marijuana are 34% below projections. Now, back in 2016, Californians voted to allow the sale of recreational marijuana, and advocates of the move envisioned thousands of pot shops and cannabis farms getting state licenses, making the drug easily available to all adults within a short drive. But as the first year of licensed sales has come to a close, it's not performing as state officials and the cannabis industry had hoped. And retailers and growers are saying the problem is complex regulations, high taxes, and decisions by many cities to simply ban the shops outright. And basically, a lot of citizens are going to city halls and courts trying to close pot businesses they see as nuisances. There's concern about crime that is gathering around them. Well, maybe, maybe not. Maybe they're just watching reruns of Reefer Madness. I mean, it's obviously worked out very well over in Colorado, but I would suspect what's probably going on out in California. It even said it in the article, high regulations, high taxes. California wanted to tax the heck out of recreational marijuana, and probably people in California are realizing that even though there is a risk of arrest for growing your own, that's far cheaper than going to those state-sanctioned pot shops. So a little bit of rebellion out there. There's been another recall, this one by Toyota. They're recalling 1.7 million vehicles in North America to replace potentially deadly Takata front passenger airbags. And it seems to me that I recall that we have seen this before with the Takatas. And apparently it includes 1.3 million vehicles right here in the United States of America. It's part of the largest series of automotive recalls in the nation's history. And apparently these Takata inflators can explode with too much force and hurl shrapnel into the drivers and passengers. And like I said, I have it in the back of my head. There's been a problem with these Takata airbag systems before. Okay, talking about immigration, refugees, and so forth. Apparently, California and New York have rolled out taxpayer-funded free health care for illegal aliens, which means that illegal immigrants are now going to flock to California and New York to get free health care. Gee, I wish that legal American citizens could get free health care, especially those veterans. We'll be back after station identification. And aloha America, welcome back to our show here. And let's see, I'm going to try and balance sound levels here. I'm still getting complaints about the new audio system, so just give me a second here to do this, and hopefully, yeah, that will balance things up a little bit better. Testing. Okay, so there we are. I need my own control room tech out here. All right, so before we went to the station identification, we were looking at how California and New York have rolled out these taxpayer-funded health care for illegal immigrants. Illegal immigrants in California and New York will get free health care. And this is coming from California's new governor, Gavin Newsom, and New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio. And free, of course, is a misnomer, because tax-paying Americans are going to foot the bill, and it will be expensive. We have the most expensive health care on the entire planet. Now, Newsom is out there trying to explain how California would pay for the expansion of health care for illegals, which he signed into law by executive order earlier this month. It did not even go through the legislature. Now, California is already in financial ruin. So they're just really not thinking about the long term. It's, I think, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, when she was running for office, and she was talking about all this free stuff for illegals, and the newscaster said, how are you going to pay for it? And she, it was the Medicare for all. She said, well, we'll just pay for it. How are you going to pay for it? Oh, we'll just pay for it. They're really not thinking here. I just got an email from somebody saying, have you heard anything about the Supplemental Nutrition Assist Program with the shutdown? Actually, the last I heard is that the food stamp money will continue past the end of the month. They are not cutting it off because of the shutdown. So those of you who are on that assistance, you can take a deep breath. Getting on back to this issue of free health care for the illegals in California and in New York. Obviously, illegal immigrants who are ill and who've come to the United States to get free health care because they don't want to pay the doctors back in their own country, they're going to be traveling across the country to get to California and New York. And every step of the way, they'll be exposing Americans to whatever illness they have. And so far, we are seeing come across that southern border tuberculosis, especially the drug-resistant tuberculosis, flu, infections, HIV, H1N1. There's even been a case of bubonic plague. And don't forget, it looks like Ebola is breaking out of the Republic of Congo. We had that story about these people from Africa showing up in Mexico, heading for the U.S. border. What if one of them is a carrier? This is a public health nightmare. All right, we're going to take a phone call from David in Texas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, I was just going to ask you a quick question. How do you prove that you're an illegal alien?
Well, I think the burden of proof is proving that you are a legal U.S. citizen.
Yeah, but for the free health care, if the Americans can't have the free health care, how are they going to prove that you're illegal alien? I was just wondering.
Well, I think if you just go up there and say, you know, I'm an illegal immigrant, I don't know. It's just a handout program. And again, this is all about getting the illegal immigrants to vote Democrat to get free stuff, even though they're not supposed to vote.
Yeah, I can change my name to Gonzalez and get some of that free health care then, huh?
Yeah, maybe I should evolve a Mexican accent and go with my last name Rivero. It's actually Sephardic, but it sounds Hispanic.
Yeah.
You know, donde está the free health care?
Yeah, well, I'll get in on it. Thanks, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Okay, story coming on out from Breitbart. There is a former jihadist who is basically gone public, revealing that there is a network that is currently smuggling Islamic radicals into Europe, disguised as illegal migrants and asylum seekers. These are terrorists. Now, apparently, based on this information, Italian police have arrested 15 suspects that are part of this organization that are literally bringing radical Islamic terrorists into Italy. And the arrests were made in the cities of Palermo, Trapani, Caltanissetta, and Brescia. And the 15 suspects are facing various criminal charges from forming a criminal association for the purpose of illegal immigration and smuggling to terrorism-related charges. Now, we're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Over in Great Britain, it looks like Theresa May is in serious trouble regarding her Brexit deal. Even more members of Parliament have basically pulled their support. They're against her Brexit deal. So that looks like that's going to be a trans. Now, here is somebody walking their talk. Remember Rolls-Royce? Classic car, world famous, made in Britain. And the chief executive, Torsten Müller-Ötvös of Rolls-Royce, is saying that after the EU exit, the Rolls-Royce will continue to be made in Britain and only in Britain. They're going to close down the factories they set up on the EU mainland. And he says basically the Rolls-Royce brand belongs to Britain. And apparently, even though Ford and Toyota and Chevy and Dodge are having bad Carmageddon years because the money junkies have got so much money, Rolls-Royce apparently had record sales this last year. All right, let's take another phone call. Jim in New York, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Mike. Dustin was asking about how, what would it, when an American's going to say enough. Well, I don't think they will. There won't be a, quote, civil war unless there's like food shortages. You know, there's an expression, they say Joe six-pack. As long as Joe six-pack has his six-pack, he's not gonna mind. But as soon as you take it away from him, and he's gonna get
Well, yeah, food shortages have always led to civil unrest here. But again, if you look at all the propaganda that's been going on in this country from groups like Antifa and Black Lives Matter, or even the feminists that have been selling this idea that all of the evils of the world, and certainly all of the evils of the United States, are the fault of white heterosexual males, we're being set up for the same situation that we saw in Zimbabwe, that we're currently seeing in South Africa, where there may be a spontaneous civil war against white people just because they're white. And I'd like to say that that's beyond the realm of possibility. But again, based on what we're seeing happen in many countries in South Africa, it's certainly possible that it could happen here.
Yeah, it's possible. I don't see it happen. I see civil disturbance if there's an economic bank problems, or the EBT machines don't give out. There'll definitely be civil disturbance. But a civil war, I mean, what would the logistics be? Who would be fighting who? Would it be the people against the government?
That's one form that it could take. That would be called a revolution, not a civil war. You are correct in that for our first civil war, there were clearly delineated sides. There was the Union states, and then there were the Confederate states, and then there was the war zone between them. In the current situation, everybody's all blended together. So, you know,
yes.
Now there might be a mass migration where, certainly we're seeing the illegals flock to California and New York. We're seeing regular Americans start to abandon some of these urban centers and states to move to areas with better economies, and we could actually see our population stratify that way. And once you have a stratified population, then a civil war definitely becomes possible.
You know, there's a gentleman I know from work. He's almost 80 years old, and, you know, I was talking to him, and he said he was hearing talk of a civil war in the 1960s. So,
there was talk of a civil war in the 1960s. The war in Vietnam had polarized the nation, and there was the peace movement, and probably the only reason we didn't have a civil war was the peace movement. But it got dangerously close following Kent State, when it became very obvious, that the government was willing to use lethal force to keep promoting that war. And then, of course, it came on out later in the Pentagon Papers that even when Kent State happened, the government knew the war in Vietnam was unwinnable, and they still went ahead and shot those kids dead.
Yes, it's a terrible thing. But, you know, it's like if a revolution, like in France, you know, the question, who goes first? Like, who's... You know, I've seen in life, like, guys run out and they're we're going to protest. And a couple guys, they run out to the front, and the two guys get in trouble, and then 100 guys go home. So who would start it? Who would lead a quote, like what you have in France, the yellow vest?
Well, what you have in France... There are people who have come to the forefront as spokespeople, but it's a grassroots, leaderless revolution, and that's why the French government doesn't know what to do with it. If you have an organized rebellion or civil war with leaders in front of it, those leaders obviously become targets. If you have a leaderless resistance, it is much, much harder for the government to deal with. And again, as I was telling that caller earlier, most Americans are aware something has gone horribly wrong with our country, but it's existing on an intellectual level inside their brain. But all it's going to take is one event to shove it down to the emotional level, and that's when the yellow vests are going to start going on, I think.
Yeah, well, that would be some sort of economic collapse where people, they can't heat their homes, they can't feed, they can't get food. Well, then
it could be, it could be the inescapable revelation that 9/11 was an inside government job. I mean, already the majority of the American people don't believe the official 9/11 story. But if something were to come on out that would drive it from the intellectual to the emotional level, people are ready to break. I'm hearing that all the time from callers to the show. I'm seeing in all of the emails. I'm not looking forward to it, but I understand the dynamic of what's happening. And we're reaching the point where the desire for change is becoming so great, nothing can stop it. Not me, not the government, not the corporate media. And we're rapidly approaching that point.
Yeah. But, they say, they use the frog in the pot. As long as you do things slowly and incrementally, most people will just take it. Oh, and you know what? I have sort of a prediction. I think, and I'm afraid that Trump, after the next fake shooting, school shooting, this is just a prediction that the Congress is going to pass what they call red flag gun laws.
Oh, they're already out there. They're already out there pushing that.
The moderate Senate, led by Marco Rubio, who's pro-red flag gun controls, will pass it. Trump's will sign it. I think
no, the House is already looking at a new draconian assault weapons ban that's going to ban basically everything.
No, I don't think they want to ban everything. I think they're shooting for these red flag laws where if you're like a good citizen...
Jim, separate from the red flag law, the House of Representatives just introduced a new bill for a national ban on everything they declare to be an assault weapon, meaning any weapon that the American people could use to resist government tyranny, which of course is the whole point of the Second Amendment, and has been reaffirmed by several Supreme Court decisions that the Second Amendment reserves to the American people weapons identical to those being carried by the uniformed services. Because the whole point of the Second Amendment is to give the government a reason to mind its own business. This government doesn't want to mind its own business. They're desperate for more of our money. They're desperate for more of our children for their wars. Anyway, Jim, got to let you go. Got to take another phone call here. So we're going to switch over to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, how you doing, Mike? Mike, what's going on, I think, in France now, and you see that little rat there, Macron, is starting to get more and more nasty, locking people up and making threats. I think this could easily happen here. By the way, I believe that what's going to happen eventually in France, I think they're going to just depose this guy. I think either the people are going to drag him out of the palace or the military is going to do it for them. But I don't think he's going to get away from it. And maybe they'll even have the guillotine ready. But this could easily happen in the United States. And one of the ways I think it could happen is, first of all, illegal aliens running amok in this country, like just pointing out before, getting benefits that Americans can't even get, like you see in California, New York. The other thing is, of course, the guns. The minute they come for the guns, Mike, I think it's on. Plain and simple. Americans are not going to get... there's a reason they want these guns. They want the guns because they know unless in the world, and yet they still have shootings all the time. People, who evildoers will get a hold of weapons.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's just another money-making opportunity for smuggling rings.
Yeah, but they want us to count on the government for protection. They want to count on the police to protect us, and all kinds of other, government bureaucrats. And that's just not going to, that's not what America's about. It just isn't. I believe police have too much power as it is. I don't think they should have any kind of authority off duty other than just like a regular citizen. I don't think they should be peace officers off duty. I don't say they shouldn't be able to carry weapons. I think everybody should be able to carry weapons. But, but this is what they want. They want you to count more and more on them, the government, and their agents.
Yeah, but every time you count on the government and their agents, they let you down. The Securities Exchange Commission let us all down with Bernie Madoff. The FDA let us down on the vaccines. The Federal Reserve has let us down on the economy. TSA has let us down on actually finding any real terrorists, and of course they're looting our luggage. We're being forced to be dependent on a government that abuses us. We're like all children of abusive parents, and we're being expected to just ignore the fact that we're being abused. And I think more and more people are waking up and saying, no, I am being abused, and I'm tired of being abused.
By the way, that's good news what you said before about TSA starting to quit and complaining and all that.
Yes.
Good riddance. Don't let the door hit them, where. Because, like I said, that's a useless organization. It should never have been created in the first place. And I haven't taken a plane in years because I'm not going to go through that screening thing they got there. I don't trust it.
Yeah, but they're now doing it at train stations and bus stations. See, unfortunately, here in Hawaii, if we go anywhere, it has to be on an airplane. Of course, Claire and I haven't gone anywhere, I think, in like about 3 years now. Anyway, listen, Mark, got to let you go. Got to take a break for some commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And we're talking about migration, the effect that it's having. Over in Germany, two professors, Hans Dieter Schwind, and I don't have the other guy's name here, are basically saying that the German welcome culture is over. And people are focusing on resistance and their national identity. So despite Angela Merkel's best efforts, Germany is going back to being Germany. And the Germans are seeing migration increasingly as a threat, as are pretty much all of the nations in the EU and even here in the United States of America. And it's gotten so bad, as we were mentioning the other day, up in Sweden, if you criticize migration, you get charged with a hate crime. You get arrested. They take you to court. They're trying to just shove this globalization down our throats. And I think people are getting fed up with that. Now, the other day, the state chairman for Alternative for Germany party over in Bremen was attacked and almost beaten to death by 3 masked thugs. And police are saying it's a politically motivated act. Yeah, it is. And I saw a photo of this guy in the hospital. I would not be surprised if he suffered brain damage. So the leader of the Alternative for Germany party, Alice Weidel, said it's completely shocking. And the media shares part of the blame because of its constant smear campaign against her democratically elected party. And yes, the German media has been attacking Alternative for Germany because they're not globalists. They're not working for George Soros. Therefore, they must be bad. They must be bad. And unfortunately, people can get incited to do certain things if these people weren't just hired outright here. Over at the Voice of Europe, they had a video caught on a cell phone where police officers in Berlin were subject to an attack by Middle Eastern migrants. And apparently this was actually happened on New Year's Eve. And these Middle Eastern refugees basically just came out of nowhere and attacked the police officers. And apparently they had firearms, and they caused a great deal of injury. So yeah, how's that open borders thing working out for you here? And this is probably going to get the hairs up on the back of your neck. This is coming out of Breitbart here. The European Union has granted 10 million euros to university researchers studying the role of the Quran. in the intellectual and religious development of countries across the continent. They're funding research into Islam. And the aim of the research is to determine how the Quran can be incorporated into the thoughts of Christians and Jews, freethinkers, atheists, and European Muslims. So apparently, converting the entire world to Islam is part of the globalist agenda. Now, over in Great Britain, again, apparently they're teaching religion in the public schools. And the religion they're teaching in the public schools is Islam. And it's resulted in parents removing their children from the schools, saying, no, we're not going to allow this. What are British public schools teaching Islam for? It's bad enough to teach religion at all. Religion properly belongs in the churches, or if you prefer, the mosques or the synagogues. Public schools should be about readying children to participate in society, the job market, higher education. Now, apparently, Sharifa Al-Khatib, who was the former managing editor of the International Institute for Islamic Thought's American Journal of Islamic Social Sciences, there's a mouthful, is basically out there saying U.S. schools should be used to convert America to Islam. Now, that violates the separation of church and state. It also violates that provision of the First Amendment that says there should be no respect given to any one religion over any other. Anyway, apparently EU politicians are joining the anti-Hungarian government protests in support of George Soros, because Viktor Orban and his nationalism is something George Soros does not like, and so now Soros is trying to organize political pressure against him. We'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, we're talking about what's going on over in Europe. We may be seeing the beginning of the breakup of the European Union because Hungary is talking nationalism, strong borders, going their own way. Italy has been talking about the same thing. And Italy's Salvini is now suggesting a European spring to counter the German-French axis on the continent. Now, Italy and Poland are siding with Hungary in terms of going back to being individual sovereign nations. Germany and France, of course, are fully on board with globalism, even though their populations are not. So this could be the schism. We could see Europe break along those lines, with France and Germany going one way, and Italy, Hungary, Poland, and probably a bunch of others going the other way. Okay, so it's a failed experiment, and it failed for two reasons. First of all, they wired in that built-in self-destruct system called the European Central Bank, which economically preyed on the EU, and then that open borders policy. That was it. Remember Harvey Weinstein? Got accused of sexual harassment, kicked off this whole hashtag #MeToo movement. And apparently, and I don't know how Harvey was able to pull this off, but a federal judge in Los Angeles dismissed actress Ashley Judd's sexual harassment claim against Harvey Weinstein, but said she could proceed with a defamation claim against him. Now, Judd had accused Weinstein of defaming her in 1998 after she refused what she said were his sexual advances a year earlier. So it looks like Harvey's going to get out of trouble. And I worked in Hollywood. I know how it works over there. Those people at the very top, yeah, they get away literally with murder. All right, you're going to like these next few stories here. Remember, not too long ago, there were these two lesbians who filed a complaint against a Christian baker after she declined to make a cake for a same-sex celebration. They made a big stink about it, where, oh my goodness, it's discrimination. And I was always saying, why don't you just go to a baker who'll give you what you want? Why make a big stink about it? It has now come to light that these lesbians wore hidden microphones to record the refusal. In other words, this was a setup. They deliberately targeted this baker to get money and destroy this baker, this Kathy, for her Christian faith. And the couple never intended to actually celebrate the marriage with the cake. And their lawyer is saying, with this development, this case is not going to go anywhere. Well, it may, because the lesbians also violated California Penal Code Section 632, which says if you're going to record a conversation, all parties present must know the recording is being made. Obviously, this baker, Kathy, did not know. This is a violation of California's, well, we can't call it wiretapping, but it's basically the same thing. And I hope somebody out there prosecutes them. Down in Australia, Bettina Arndt is currently touring Australian universities, speaking out about the so-called rape crisis on all their campuses. That's being promoted out there, by the feminists. Oh, there's a rape crisis. It's horrible. Women are victims. And she's asking why the university administrations are lying about the safety of the universities, because the Australian Human Rights Commission did a survey showing over 99% of students said they had never experienced sexual assault. Now, the radical feminists pulled this one here in the United States back in the 1990s, claiming there was a rape epidemic. They demanded funding for rape crisis centers, other special protections, grants to study the problem. All kinds of money was flowing. Women claiming they were raped in the most outlandish manner, shot to instant media stardom. They were on Oprah and Donahue. Innocent men got sent to prison. Catherine Comans, the assistant dean of student activity at Vassar, actually went public in the press, I think it was in Newsweek magazine, saying that a false rape charge is a good experience for a man to go through. That's how crazy it was. And it is tragic to see it all happening all over again. Did we learn nothing from the mistakes of the 1990s? Up in Canada, Dr. Rachel McKinnon from Victoria, a transgender athlete, has won the Cycling World Championship, the UCI Masters Track Cycling World Championship. She won the gold medal, she. Born a male, born biologically male, which has once again kicked off the debate about allowing transgender men who are biologically male to compete against biologically females. And we have been seeing these stories over the last several months. Transgender woman wins this, wins that. It's unfair to these girls. It's unfair to these girls to allow this to go on. It makes a mockery of their going to athletics and training for a sport where some guy who doesn't want to be a guy anymore comes on in with his biologically male body and just is able to outdo them. There's a reason there's men's and women's divisions in sports, because on average men are taller and stronger than women. And that's the way it was supposed to be. Now, Martina Navratilova, probably remember her from the tennis circuit, Wimbledon champion. And she's a campaigner for LGBT, but she came on out and said that people who are born male should not be allowed to compete in women's sports events, at which point she was accused of being transphobic. Oh my goodness, she's transphobic. And there's an article over at Spiked Online saying this is the year of trans tyranny, where we've reached the point where just the word woman is being treated as an expletive. It's a dangerous word. You're not supposed to use it. They're pushing this transgenderism as an ideology. that insists all aspects of public life must comply with its demands? I don't think so. Over at The Guardian, they have an article saying, let us be free to debate transgenderism without being accused of hate speech. And apparently, a recent communist-free piece by the transgender activist Roz Kavanagh, headlined "Radical Feminists Are Acting Like a Cult," criticizes a forthcoming radical feminist conference on the grounds that one of the speakers may be guilty of hate speech for their criticism of transgenderism, primarily of this idea of trying to impose transgenderism on other people, especially children. This is being pushed in the schools. Over on YouTube, they're starting to censor what are called transgender regret videos. This is a growing phenomenon where people who've gone through the transgender process, they've had the surgery both directions, they realize it doesn't fix what was wrong with their lives. It just added more problems on top of it. And they've started making videos saying, I really regret having done this. And apparently under pressure from an active LGBTQ lobby, YouTube is censoring them. They're taking them away so that people can't find out that those who go through the transgender process, very often it's not a happy ending. Now there's another story out here from 12160, and it's talking about this move to have a transgender James Bond for the next James Bond movie. Because after this next one, Bond 25 is released later this year, Daniel Craig is hanging up his tuxedo. They're looking for a new actor to portray James Bond. And actor Dominic West is suggesting the next Bond should be transsexual, because that would be cool. And he doesn't explain why that would be cool. But he does have a suggestion that this new Bond be played by Hannah Graf, the highest-ranking transgender officer in the British Army. Well, basically what they're going to do is take this long-running, successful, multi-billion-dollar franchise, and they're going to wreck it. I mean, look at the current Doctor Who. The numbers are horrible. People tuned out. Audience, when you've built an audience for a franchise, they have certain expectations. James Bond is a manly man. Doctor Who is a more cerebral, intellectual man, more fun-loving man. The Ghostbusters were men. When you start mucking around with that, you're going to have an economic disaster. And the remake of Ghostbusters with an all-female cast is a good example. They reworked the script, they updated the visual effects, they put in an all-female cast, and the cast was good. And it was an epic disaster because people were saying, that's not the Ghostbusters. Okay, we know what the Ghostbusters are. That's not the Ghostbusters. And it's going to be the same thing if they do a trans Bond. It'll be an economic disaster. I guarantee it. Over in Great Britain, a little bit of common sense is broken out over there. The Supreme Court has unanimously decided that the refusal to bake a cake with the message "support gay marriage" on it cannot be qualified as discrimination on the grounds of sexual orientation. The judges emphasized the importance of the right to freedom from forced speech. There's a good phrase. We ought to have that. In addition to freedom of speech, freedom from forced speech. Pointing out that the rights to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion, and to freedom of expression includes the right not to be obliged to manifest beliefs one does not hold. I think it's a brilliant decision and a brilliant precedent, and it's a brilliant phrase, freedom from forced speech. Over in Pennsylvania, at a high school, their theater department was getting ready to put on a production of Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare. And if you're familiar with the play, you know that part of the cast consists of monks. And the monks are wearing robes, monks' robes. And apparently one of the cast members wandered outside during a rehearsal, and one of the other students said, "Oh my goodness, I'm shocked, I'm upset. It's a white robe. And think of all the bad images that go with it. And so now the high school has forbidden the wearing of the robes by the monks in Romeo and Juliet. I don't know what the monks are going to wear, blue jeans and T-shirts maybe, or maybe they'll just do it nude. I don't know. But I mean, this is really getting ridiculous. Alrighty, this is an important story. Came out of Zero Hedge, a bunch of other places here as well. If the U.S. healthcare system was its own country, it would have the 5th largest gross domestic product on the entire planet, coming in just behind the United States as a whole, China, Japan, and Germany. $3.5 trillion a year. America's healthcare system is the world's largest money-making scam, and that's exactly what it is. The most expensive healthcare, something like 33rd, 34th in quality, and it's all about pushing product. Push the product. Get the vaccines out there. Take the vaccines. Yes, it doesn't work against this year's flu virus. Doesn't matter. Take the vaccine anyway. Apparently, there is a major measles outbreak, the worst in decades, sweeping New York, Oregon, Washington. Thank goodness all those states have mandatory measles vaccine laws. So there we are. Now, interestingly enough, story out of 12160, Cheryl Atkinson, who was this forthright journalist formerly with CBS TV News, is basically persistent in her media exposures regarding vaccine-caused health problems, especially autism spectrum disorder, ever since she did an in-depth report for CBS, which CBS refused to broadcast. That led to Cheryl's independent journalism programs, a blessing in disguise. Now, recently, Cheryl exposed that CDC's expert vaccine witness, who previously debunked vaccine autism claims during Vaccine's Injury Masters hearing, Dr. Andrew Zimmerman, a pediatric neurologist, apparently told CDC long ago that vaccines could cause autism. CDC refused to accept Zimmerman's information. Instead, they fired him. Now, the other day we were talking about this new 6-in-1 vaccine manufactured by GlaxoSmithKline. And apparently somebody just leaked out internal documents over the last 2 years. This vaccine has killed 36 babies. Now, Initiative Citoyen, a Belgium-based vaccine activism network, reports in a 1,200-page document thousands of adverse reactions occurred during the evaluations, which took place between 2009 and 2011. GlaxoSmithKline's official report declares that only 14 children died during the 2-year period. Initiative Citoyen says their own analysis shows it's more. IC reports that at least 73 children have died since the Infarix Hexa vaccine made its debut in 2000. Okay, Michael Babich, who resigned as the Arizona-based drug makers CEO, has pled guilty in federal court to conspiracy and mail fraud charges after getting a deal with prosecutors. Basically, he pled guilty to bribing doctors to prescribe addictive opioids. Okay, we're going to start with a phone call. Pat in Texas, I'm going to have to take you over the commercial break into our last segment of the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, you mentioned freedom of religion, and I've been thinking about it today because, Dave Barton from Wall Builders over here in Farmers Branch, Texas. He's well known. You can find him on the internet. And he has said before, and it sounds good, that if we had met by religion... Pat, I'm sorry. I'm going to put you on hold. Stay with that. We're going to come right back to you after these words from our sponsors. Hello,
Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today. We're talking with Pat in Texas. And Pat, you were about to give us a quote from somebody who's down in your part of the world.
Yeah, Dave Martin, Wall Builders. He's real up on American history and Christian history too. And he says there's no way that the 13 states would have ratified the Constitution if freedom of religion meant Satanism or anti-Christian religion that's even anti our political system. And that's what Islam is. And we have a fight going on here to take over terror.
I have to sort of back up on you, and because all of these religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, all trace their roots back to Abraham, who basically is one of the people who is credited with coming up with the idea of a monotheistic religion. Akhenaten, of course, being the other one.
Oh, they do.
Well, you know, all of these religions are saying that every other religion is satanistic and evil and bad. And as Mark Twain used to say, man is the only animal that's got the true religion, several of them.
Well, you know, Abraham was an Iraqi sun worshiper until God talked to him, and he believed God. So technically, a Jew is anybody who believes God. However, I don't want to get into that one. But these people, they have their Jesus is coming back to see them, but it's not Jesus. It's the Antichrist Jesus. That's the one they're waiting on, and he's going to kill the Jews and establish them. And that's the devil telling them that, because it's not going to happen. They're actually, if we keep letting them take over like this, what we're going to do is cause their death, because you cannot go against the real God with Jehovah, and their God is Allah, who was a false god from pagan God back. But
it's the same God. It's the same God.
No,
it's just a different name. Okay. All right, Pat. Pat, thanks an awful lot. Pat, thanks an awful lot for your opinion. We're going to let you go. And we're coming up here on the end of the show. Over in Cleveland, somebody's been testing the water over there, and it turns out their tap water has lead levels as high as that found in Flint, Michigan. And this is a problem that is showing up all across the country. And we're talking about a population being subjected to lead poisoning. Now, what are the symptoms of lead poisoning? Decreased cognitive abilities, reduced ability to focus on, learn, and remember new things. Look about our falling academic scores. Fatigue, irritability, headache, basically other things like that. And I'm looking at that irritability and wondering if that's one of the reasons why Americans seem more prone to violence, whether it's road rage or bar fights. And it's bad enough with the SSRIs. And now the tap water is helping as well. Anyway, there's the music. And by the way, before we go, I got to fit this in. Do not install the latest Windows 7 patch. I'll tell you why tomorrow. Stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got a lot of interesting things to share with you. Please share what you learn here with other people. And please donate to RBN. Please donate to whatreallyhappened.com. And we'll be back tomorrow. And the Lady Claire will be with us in hour number 3. Aloha, America.